Hello, you're watching TVP World, and this is World Talks. My name is Sasha Farbach. President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping have held a rare phone call initiated by Beijing, resulting in plans for Trump to visit China in April and for Xi to make a state visit to the United States later in the year. The conversation touched on Ukraine, trade, tariffs, and a stark message from Xi that Taiwan must return to China, underscoring both cooperation and deep strategic friction. We're now joined by Tomasz Płudowski, Associate Professor at Vizja University. Thanks so much for joining us here on TVP World.
Good morning.
Morning. So I want to begin with this rare display of Xi Jinping apparently on this phone call that he initiated. Now, this is a rare occurrence. What does that tell us? What does that tell us about China's intentions in all this?
Well, it seems that China has the intention of making good with the U.S., and this is a long process, prolonged process. And the representatives of both countries have already met several times, and they have plans, and they already had before this phone call, they had plans to meet again in China and in the U.S., as you said. Trump is going to go to the U.S. In April, before they met in South Korea. And there's a lot of issues on the table, and some of them have been resolved initially, and some are left to be resolved, especially new technologies, TikTok. But what they have achieved so far is that they agreed, that China agreed, well, actually both countries agreed that China would buy more soybeans from the U.S. will accelerate this. So this is what happened during this conversation, that China would accelerate the purchase of American soybeans. So this is something for American farmers, although farmers do not constitute such a large percentage of American population as they do, for example, they did in Poland, and they still do to a larger extent than in the U.S. But this is Trump's electorate mostly. So this this makes Trump happy. But there's still a lot of issues left to be discussed. For example, new technologies, and especially NVIDIA and chips and TikTok, like I said, the new technologies that China is interested in to accelerate its economic and technological expansion and to catch up with the United States, or maybe even overtake the United States in this area, because this is where the US is still ahead of China more or less by 10 years. But in a lot of other areas, it's much more developed, and it's progressing much faster. It's developing much faster than the US, and it's a major threat, mostly economically, probably not so much militarily, but also it's taking over a lot of the areas that the US has taken since the Second World War globally.
Right. A lot in that. And I want to ask you a little bit about what you said at the beginning about China making good with the United States. There are different points to that, but I'm curious, we went from a very cold relationship, a big rivalry. Now this call from Xi, is this something in the line of, let's say, this mix? Also, I want to throw Russia in there as well. Is this, let's say, genuine strategic concern that Beijing has? Is this something that China is showing its alignment more close to the United States, maybe more against Russia? How do we view Russia in all this dynamic? Have they pushed them here, or how does this triangle work out strategically?
Well, I think this is a very subtle issue, and it's something that is very much alive and dynamic. So I don't see we're going to see here a clear division, a clear cleavage between two countries. We'll see more of this triangulation between the three countries, and each of them is going to play it to their own advantage without, I think, making one of the countries a clear enemy. So I don't think Trump will be successful in drawing Russia away from China. China might be a little bit worried about that, although China is much stronger than Russia, and it's playing its cards very well, especially in Asia and in Africa, and taking over those areas and spheres and aspects that the U.S. has abandoned and is abandoning by Trump's, to a certain degree, isolationist policies. But I don't think we're going to see here two countries siding very clearly with each other against the third one, like during the Cold War. I think it's going to be much more subtle, and probably in the long term, China will continue to accelerate and overtake the U.S. Economically in the world. Mm-hmm. And it obviously, if Trump helps with by providing this chip that China is interested in, then this process will accelerate. And a lot of Americans, including Republicans, are worried that this is a matter of security for the U.S. and long-term strategic goals, and they should not do that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, Trump is really very kind of atypical, and he's capable of anything. And I think he sees global relations, American foreign policy, in a very different way. There's very little continuation here. He's mostly interested in short-term gains, and I don't think he looks long-term, except maybe in relation to China. But even here, I mean, a lot of those negotiations resume after a year. A lot of those contracts or agreements only last for a year. So I don't see this long-term project here. If you look at what Trump says and what Trump does, there's a lot of it's difficult to predict unpredictability on his part.
Understood. At the same time, I'm curious because you mentioned that this ambiguity, with the strategic ambiguity between not really having one side against the other. I mean, Russia has touted this extremely close relationship and partnership with Beijing. I mean, they have the optics that look good, but as you've just said, China is in some way also playing its cards. I'm wondering about the plans that are sort of in the offing of Trump, also very much trying to coax Vladimir Putin. I mean, some of these point plans that we've heard, the meeting in Alaska, etc., other things, where he really wants to have that closer cooperation, investment cooperation with Russia. How do you think that's going to sit with China?
Well, I don't think that China obviously has a lot of common interests with Russia, but there's also a lot of competition. They compete for more or less the same areas, and they have common borders. China, to a certain extent, is helping obviously Russia. It doesn't want Ukraine to win, obviously, for China, it's the U.S. that is the main competitor. But I don't think that China believes that the U.S. can kind of pull Russia away from China, because there's much more. China has much more in common with Russia, also ideologically, and it needs Russia obviously also for transport. For transportation of its goods to Europe. I mean, it can use the sea, but it traditionally has used the railroads for much of recent history.
But haven't they already started building around? Sorry to jump in there. I mean, you're talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, but the Chinese have already been building something around that, exactly because of this, that the unreliability of Russia. So, can they not just bypass Russia on the transport front?
Obviously, I mean, kind of like Europe with gas and energy resources. I mean, it's good to differentiate in case the future is unpredictable. And obviously, Russia is the most unpredictable of the three countries. And China is the most predictable one, actually. This is quite surprising that China has, in many ways, for partners, it's taken over the position that the U.S. has traditionally had as the predictable country. And with Trump, the U.S. is very unpredictable, and Russia is even more unpredictable given its political system. It's hard to tell what will happen once Putin is out of the picture, and he can be very easily, due to natural course of events, due to biology and the passage of time. And it cannot be guaranteed that Russia continues to be a safe and predictable country. politically or militarily. As we've seen with Ukraine, Russia is quite unpredictable here, and most people think that once it is satisfied, and it will be most probably, and now after those peace talks, that I don't think will conclude positively, because the way they conduct this is kind of like the U.S. talking with Russia separately and then talking with Ukraine separately, but Ukraine and Russia not really agreeing on much or talking much with each other. So I don't think that these peace talks will conclude, and Russia will continue its war, and most probably it will attack or it will be aggressive towards other countries, and it will want to go back to its imperial past. So once Putin is out of the picture, it's difficult to predict what will happen. So China obviously has to take precautions and do what you said it's doing.
Mm-hmm. So it does sound it's going to be a very interesting dynamic with unpredictability against predictability. And an interesting statement there. A lot of hard issues on the table, from tariffs to international relations and the economy. Look, we'll close it there. Thank you so much. Really interesting insights there from our guest, Tomasz Płudowski. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.